Hi everyone, welcome back to China Freedom File. The U.S. Director for National Intelligence recently spoke about the purpose of the Chinese Communist Party, which is, he used a 3R terms, is to rob, replicate, and replace. And then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, in his speech about the U.S. academic freedom and the Chinese Communist Party, he added a third R word, which is called repress. Folks, these 3 R's and these 4 R's truly indeed represent how the Chinese Communist Party try every way to infiltrate our American society. And actually not only American, it's the whole freedom world, or the world for freedom. Make no mistake about it, we have not only seen these tactics have been implemented in the past 30-some years, but also we have witnessed with many examples. The Communist Party not only sending its own spies in the form of diplomats in the Chinese embassies, consulates all over the world. That's the traditional way of spying. And in a sense, every country is doing that. But they are guilty of even sending these civilians, sending these students, visiting professors, visiting scholars, tourist guys, even car drivers, in the name of academic exchanges, in the name of trade exchange, in the name of business negotiations. These Chinese spies, in a very extraordinary form, are being installed, established, and planted really next to every one of ours. According to a recent data leak that has been being circulated in recent days by the media from United Kingdom, Australia, Germany, United States. This data shows nearly 2 million such Chinese Communist Party members who are posed as students, academics, scholars, businessmen, and many other professions, had been sent in the past some 30 years, implanted in the U.S. universities, colleges, American and Australian and other Western nations' capitals, and the nearby the elected officials, the member of Congress, member of Parliament, and mayors, governors, and all the major business, multinational corporations, and big trade institutions like NASDAQ, like Dow Jones and London Securities Exchange, and then military, of course, installments. They use social media such as LinkedIn, of course, Facebook, and many others, public sources. Their purpose is to replace, replicate, certainly to repress the U.S. and free world, the values for freedom. And we, in the traditional term, in the free world, usually call them like, intellectual property infringers or violators, or copyright kind of thieves, disregard the intellectual property. But it's really more than that now. They come to our doors. They come to as close as your member of Congress office. And the recent hot story showing this Chinese young girl became overnight famous, called Christine Fang, or Fang Fang is her name. In 2011, Fang Fang, or Christine Fang, in her early 20s, a very pretty, attractive girl, came to enroll as a student in a university in California. And then within 4 years, before she suddenly disappeared and cut off all relationship in the U.S., she was successfully, according to U.S. intelligence officials and multiple sources, she was successfully posed as a kind of as a student, but a true Chinese honeypot spy. According to the credible U.S. intelligence sources who confirmed with multiple media reports, this Christine Fang were able to at least sexually compromised 2 Midwestern mayors, and had very close relationship with a U.S. member of Congress, a Democratic Congressman Stilwell, who is still serving in the House Intelligence Committee. She was successfully even installed an intern in his office until May 2015, when Congressman Stilwell received a defensive intel briefing by FBI telling him there's this Chinese female, young, attractive spy who had been befriended with him and all his family members, including his father, his brother. And then, according to the congressman himself, he cut off relationship, and she was just basically sleeping around with all this, small city mayors. And at one occasion, the U.S. intelligence, with their wiretap, even listened to explicit kind of event she was having with a Midwestern mayor in his car. And she claimed she was, in order to, the rationale for her to be there is to improve her English. Well, this is just a tip of the iceberg, the Kristen Fong story. And in fact, multiple photos showing she was raising fund, basically holding fundraiser for multiple members of Congress, and very close to the former Senate Intelligence Committee chairwoman, Senator Dianne Feinstein, who is the ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee now. This House and Senate Selective Committee on Intelligence, they got access to the nation's most secretive intel and really the treasure of our Americans' national property. Maybe just only the President of the United States had maybe more intel access than these members, especially, the chairman and chairwoman. So Kristen Fong is just the tip of the iceberg. That shows how aggressive the Chinese Communist Party had been in order to steal, in order to destroy the free world. They are truly wanting to replace the free world with a communist ideologue. And unfortunately, they're not satisfied in their persecution and repression against their own citizens inside the China's territory to millions of house church leaders, Tibetan Buddhists, Falun Gong practitioners, Uyghur Muslims and Christians, and underground Catholics, and petitioners, human rights lawyers, on and on. They are trying every way to extend their arms beyond their borders. And now we have seen, of course, what's happening in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong national security law even enshrined the Chinese national security law would apply to anyone, anywhere in the world, no matter which country, no matter which country's citizenship you belong to, as long as you are found with these 4 crimes, so-called secession, so-called separation, so-called terrorism, so-called collusion with foreign forces. They are working around the clock, posed as our neighbors, posed as an intern in a company, posed as a business partner, posed as a business researcher, as close as a partner with the former Vice President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden. That is as close as they could be. We all know it. Despite of the so-called mainstream media cover-up before the election, now everything is exposed. No wonder sometimes when I led some human rights defenders, house church leaders, visiting some member of Congress office, we could smell something is wrong when those even congressional leaders, their staff, start talking exactly like reciting from the talking points of the Chinese Communist Party's foreign spokesperson, by discouraging those human rights defenders, telling them, oh, democracy is messy, and democracy will take many centuries, and you need to be patient, and America is also ugly, and we shouldn't push so hard. And the Communist Party has achieved so much by removing such a big number of people from poverty line, and on and on. These exact kind of Communist Party's propaganda talking points, as if the Communist Party's repression is totally justified. That's my experience. That's the blind self-taught lawyer, Mr. Chen Guangcheng's experience. That's many human rights lawyers' experience, human rights defenders who came to the U.S. and they heard this thing again and again. It reminded me some years ago, before my good friend, former U.S. member of Congress, who is called the conscience of Congress by Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Congressman Frank Wolf. He told me some really, I think maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, he said, Bob, the Chinese Communist Party's infiltration is everywhere in the whole of U.S. Congress. And some 20 years ago, he could at least sponsor a resolution or a bill in Congress to condemn China's human rights violations, religious freedom repressions, with lots of members eager to sign up as co-sponsors. But now, he said, when he tried to even write something and send a dear colleague's letter to the member of Congress for soliciting of co-sponsorship, he said, millions of US dollars of lobbying campaign pouring in to these congressional offices, try to kill it, try to water down it, try to add language favorable to the Chinese Communist Party. This is really 1984. The form, like, have you watched that called the Animal Farm, that movie? So we are close, I think, even in a free world, operating by these animal farms, the Communist Party's propagandists, spies, nearly 2 million. And I have also experienced firsthand, as Secretary Pompeo mentioned in his recent speech, this case. In his speech about Americans' academic freedom and China's infiltration, the Communist Party's infiltration. In the Georgia Institute for Technology, he mentioned this case about Vera Zhou. Vera Zhou was a junior student 3 years ago at University of Washington, Seattle. She went back to China to visit her biological father. And then one night, she used a VPN to submit her homework by accessing to her university, the University of Washington's student portal. I mean, as every students are doing. And little did she anticipate, at midnight, she was raided in her hotel. She was kidnapped. She was handcuffed. She was put on the secret police car. She was transported, being interrogated as a separatist, as a terrorist. She was told she's a suspect of terrorist. And poor Vera, she just finished cancer surgery before she went back to China. She was basically abused and then sent to the concentration camp. I mean, this is like now 1 to 2 million Uyghurs had been experiencing right now. So she was put into one of these camps for nearly 6 months. So her mom here as American citizen in Seattle was so worried. Of course, who would not, which mom would not worry when your daughter in her 20s suddenly disappeared, basically declared incommunicado. Nobody could locate her. And she was, so her mother, Mary, had been just trying every way. Of course, her first contact, she wanted help, is the University of Washington. She emailed, no answer, no reply. She called, nobody kind of wanted to talk to her. She drove to the University of Washington, the office, from registrar to the administration. Nobody want to see a word. Folks, follow the money trail. It's just such a tragic thing to see American academic institutions are being compromised. Universities, like even Princeton University, have to use codes to have their the students talk about China's politics this year. So this is happening around us, around in our neighborhood, in the different institutions. So I just want you to really think hard. Our founding fathers, when they draft the Declaration of Independence, draft the Constitution for this nation, I think they envision something really different than what we are seeing here. They envision a republic with the fundamental freedoms as the self-evidenced rights. These truths are self-evidence. The fundamental truths is life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and freedom, and autonomy, and this fundamental rights enshrined in the First Amendments. If we allow a communist regime to use this human greediness, use this lefty ideology these pro-communist Marxism, atheistic ideologies poisoning now all over in the American academic institutions, in the major cities, in the major newspapers. Maybe 10, maybe even less than 10 years from now, some real tragedy, a national tragedy, will happen from Sydney to London to Washington, D.C., to Brussels. I think some of the European capitals already fallen into the communist control. We need to be alert. We need to be vigilant. We need to watch out. And after all, it is we, the people, not the mainstream media, not this big techs, Facebook, Google, not this partisan hacks, not this hate America political correctness, not this cultural cancel culture idiots, I think, who would determine our future. And it is the Lord. Even with the thunderstorm are being heard, God is still in his throne. So let's trust the Lord. Let's walk humbly and justly with mercy with our God. Thank you for your attention. May God continue to bless America, bless the free world, so that we won't lose our freedom.
Order your copy of this program from the GLC bookstore by calling the numbers or visiting the website on your screen. Please include the program number when ordering.